Hello. Welcome to another episode of KPMG PH Insights EOPT series. I'm Karen Jane Vergara-Manese, Country Leader of Global Mobility Services or GMS at KPMG in the Philippines. And today I'm joined by my fellow tax partners, Jozette, Issel, Dizon, and Rea-Vergara. Hello, Ice and Ruby. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Karen. Hi, Ice.
Hi, everyone.
Ruby, would you like to introduce our topic for today's episode?
With pleasure, Karen. Today's episode is entitled EOPT for Individuals, and it's about how the Ease of Paying Taxes Act or EOPT law affects or will impact individual taxpayers such as employees, self-employed individuals, and mixed income earners. The EOPT Act took effect on January 22, 2024. And I think this is the perfect timing to discuss this because the April 15 individual tax return filing deadline is nearing.
Good thing this is being implemented in time for my tax return filing this year. How about you guys? Have you filed your tax returns?
I haven't.
I have it as well.
We're on the same page then. So let's dive right into how EOPT affects us individual taxpayers. Ruby, what was top of mind when you were reviewing the law?
Well, the most noteworthy for me about the EOPT Act is that it clarified that individual taxpayers can now submit their tax return electronically or manually, including the married individuals, through the authorized agent banks, RDOs, and or tax software provider. Although these tax filing processes were already adopted by individual taxpayers prior to the EOPT Act, an option for the electronic filing is not expressly provided in the regulations.
That's right. Taxpayers do have the option to file their tax returns electronically, but that is now explicitly stated in the tax law. That being said, there may be taxpayers who would still need to have their tax returns manually stamped by the BIR, and that leads me to ask the BIR on whether or not they would still be accepting tax returns for manual stamping, especially those filed on EBR form. What are your thoughts on this, Ice?
I hope that the BIR continues to manually stamp tax forms so that it doesn't become an issue for individuals who may require the same for their personal transactions. I think that should remain available to taxpayers.
To add on to the topic of electronic filings, married individuals who are required to file a return can file a joint return electronically or manually unless joint filing is deemed impracticable. This is regardless of their tax residency status.
Great. What other changes were introduced by EOPT?
Another change, and this is an exciting one, is the file and pay anywhere option. So a taxpayer can file their tax return and pay the tax due thereon with any authorized agent bank anywhere in the country. And this isn't new because during the pandemic, the BIR allowed taxpayers to file and pay anywhere for convenience and also to promote compliance despite the very difficult situation we were in then. And we must admit that it wasn't just convenient for the taxpayers, but also for us as tax practitioners. So making this a permanent option is a very welcome change and, in my opinion, really serves the purpose of the new law.
That flexibility actually allows for better management of the tax filing process. It does eliminate the risk for penalties due to filing at the wrong venue and also reduces the risk for not being able to meet the tax filing deadline.
This will surely encourage taxpayers to comply more because the process is easier and more seamless than ever before. But given the availability of filing anywhere, I can't help but think how this will somehow impact the taxpayer's registration. Will the BIR retain the current rules in determining the correct RDO for registration purposes? Some taxpayers might ask whether they are required to update the registration when they transfer their place of residence or employment.
I think transfer of registrations will remain, Ruby. As we know, a tax payment is not the only purpose of a tax registration, so that the correct RDO should be providing taxpayer services, and that RDO should also have jurisdiction over the taxpayer. And thus, a transfer of registration should be done when moving, for example, to a new place of residence. Are there any other changes brought about by EOPT?
There's a clarificatory provision in the EOPT Act that says that an individual citizen of the Philippines who is working and deriving income solely from abroad as an overseas contract worker or an overseas Filipino worker is no longer required to file a Philippine income tax return. And I say clarificatory because this is already aligned with the current tax treatment for non-Philippine sourced income received by OCWs and OFWs. But now that this provision is in the tax code, it makes the tax filing guidelines clearer for them. What's important to highlight is that OCWs and OFWs may have other sources of income from business activities or investments that they may have back home in the Philippines. So in those cases, it's necessary to look at the overall tax situation of the individual to determine their tax filing requirements.
That's right. It is important to note as well that the tax return filing exemption is available after their departure from the Philippines. As such, if they are resident citizens who do not qualify for the substituted filing before their departure from the Philippines, they might still be required to file their tax returns.
For our OCW and OFW listeners, you might wonder what the BIR may require as evidence or proof that you are registered as an OCW or OFW. As you may know, OFWs and OCWs are tax exempt on their income derived from offshore sources, and it's important to keep the proper documentation so that you can properly avail of the tax exemption. I hope that the BIR can issue a clarifying statement in an IRR about the OCW documentation or OFW documentation in that matter, but my personal take is that I think documents such as the OBC and an employment contract and other equivalent paper can be used to validate your claim as an OFW and OCW.
Prior to the EOPT Act, those documents were used by some taxpayers as a support for their non-resident citizen status and for non-filing of their tax returns.
Certainly, Ruby, under the EOPT Act, taxpayers are classified into micro, small, medium, and large according to the level of the gross sales. Based on the recent public consultation and the draft revenue regulations, these classifications do not cover persons who earn pure compensation income.
Another change relevant to the classification of taxpayer is that under the draft revenue regulations, those individual taxpayers who will register to be engaged in business or practice of profession will be initially classified based on their declaration of income in their registration forms. However, for those existing taxpayers will be required to update the registration because of the change in the classification of taxpayers. I hope that the BIR will issue a more precise and detailed guidelines on the process of updating and requirements.
I agree.
With the draft revenue regulations and public consultations, we are a step closer to getting clarity on EOPT. So thus far in this episode, we've tackled electronic filing option, file and pay anywhere, no tax return filing requirement for OCWs and OFWs, transfer registration requirements, and classification of taxpayers. Would you like to share any parting words?
The EOPT Act focuses on modernizing tax administration by encouraging effective and cost-efficient compliance, updating the taxation system, and implementing tailored policies for the different types of taxpayers. So with this, employers should view the EOPT Act as an opportunity to enhance the tax filing experience of their employees.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And if companies or individuals need assistance with understanding the impact of the EOPT Act to their tax compliance, they can reach out to us at KPMG in the Philippines and we'll be happy to help them.
That's all the time we have for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in to KPMG PH Insights EOPT series and tune in for more of our upcoming episodes.